Start? Okay, good afternoon. Just about to start the 3 o'clock agenda. We're behind. We were quite behind this morning, and we sort of caught up at the 1 o'clock. During the declared emergency, Committee of Adjustments virtual public hearings are being conducted by electronic means through WebEx, an online digital platform, and streamed on the Toronto City Planning YouTube channel. These measures are necessary to comply with physical distancing requirements and in-person attendance limitations. This will be a virtual public hearing, and participants who have registered in advance will be able to make their presentations to the committee using WebEx, an online event that is being moderated by city staff. Anyone wishing to view the hearing may do so by watching on YouTube. Participants who have registered in advance will be connecting either by their computer, a phone, or tablet app, or by telephone. All participants will be automatically muted on entry. When your item is called, each participant will be unmuted by the moderator, one person at a time. Only the committee members will be participating by video. Committee members participating today are Donald Taylor, Laura Alderson, Sophia Ruddick, and Danny Belissimo, and I am Michael Clark, your chair, and I am incognito. The camera is not working in here today, but we are able to put up materials on the board to have applicants and deputants refer to their materials when they're speaking. So we also ask that you mute your devices until you are called on to speak. Land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. In accordance with Sections 45 and 53 of the Planning Act, 1990 as amended, this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Toronto is called to order. The Committee of Adjustment considers applications for variances from the provisions of the zoning bylaw that apply to the property, permissions to extend or alter lawful non-conforming uses, and consents to sever properties to create new lots. Anyone in attendance today who wants to receive a copy of the decision of a committee on an application must submit a written request for a decision by email. Please ensure that you include your name, address, and email address, because Committee of Adjustment and the TLAB, in the event of an appeal, will be sending notifications and appeal updates by email. If you do not agree with the decision of the committee rendered here today, decisions may be appealed to the Toronto Local Appeal Body, TLAB, or in some limited circumstances to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT. Appeal instructions are set out at the bottom of the decision of the committee. So I'll start off. The hearing procedure will be, we go in order, we'll call each item in the order listed on the agenda. And when an application is uncontested, the agent or applicant may proceed with their presentation if desired. When the committee does not require a presentation, applicants are to advise the chair should they wish to address the committee. The committee may ask questions and or take the matter into the committee for a decision. Each speaker, including the applicant or agent, will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the committee, and I will comment when you're reaching the 5-minute mark. When addressing the committee, please state clearly your name and address for the record when you start, and please remember to confine your remarks to the matters outlined in the application. The applicant or agent will proceed first and will make a presentation to the committee of the application. Please note that the committee may not entertain revisions to proposals at the hearing today. The committee may decide to defer the application if being substantially revised, in order to ensure that the revised application is both accurate and that all those entitled to notice of the application are informed of the changes. Then individuals either in support or opposed to the application will be invited to speak. Committee members may ask questions of each speaker after they finish their presentation. When all speakers are finished, the applicant or agent is given an opportunity to rebut only those issues that were raised by the speakers. That will then mark the end of the discussion on the matter. The application is then taken into committee for a decision. Are there any declarations of interest of panel or staff for the items in the 3 o'clock time slot? Okay, none to declare. In that case, we can start off with the first application of 3 o'clock agenda, item number 34, 1224, 1228, and 1124, 1128, and 1130 Islington Avenue. It's an application to obtain consent to sever the property into 14 residential lots, a common element driveway, an amenity area, and to create easements and rights of ways. We have before us on this application survey, our plan, site plan, several cover letters, several supporting materials. Engineering, construction services, memos, planning, several planning memos. You know, this matter was actually before the committee initially August the 1st, 2019, at which time it was deferred. Sorry, wrong application. No, we just have the consent to sever. We have planning requesting condition of approval to register a section 118 restriction. And forestry, I believe, has no concerns. And planning has, other than that, has no concerns. The speaker on this application, let's see who we have. We have Stephen Key of Design Plan Services, agent, and no other speakers. Mr. Key?
Good afternoon, Sir Chair and committee members. My name is Stephen Chi. I'm a planner from Design Plan Services, and we have been retained by the owner of 1124, 1128, and 1130 Islington Avenue to present information on this application.
Okay, committee members, do you wish a presentation on this application? No? Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the agent? And I just asked the agent, you're okay with the planning condition being requested?
Yes.
In the memo dated April the 4th?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So committee members, any follow-up questions, or is someone ready for a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the essence of this application is a tenure change, basically, from a pure condo to freehold units with condo elements. So I think the principle of development has been long established, and I find the variances to be in keeping with the 4 tests. And I move approval subject to the planning department condition and the conditions set out in a memorandum from Engineering and Construction Services. And I'm just trying to find out which one of their 3 memoranda sets out those conditions.
April, I thought it was April 4th. Let me just have that up. April 6th, April 4th.
April 6th, April 8th. That sound right? 2021?
2021, April 8th is the engineering
oh, the engineering,
memo.
Okay. Because I see the planning memo. The planning memo is April 4th. That's for the section 118 restriction under the Land Titles Act?
Yes.
And
by memo dated, email, dated April 8th, Engineering and Construction Services request the condition that the applicant submit a revised condo application to city planning, address the private water main to be within an easement in favor of the condominium corporation to the satisfaction of engineering and construction services. So I would ask the agent if that's an acceptable condition of approval.
Yes, that is.
Okay, so my motion would be to approve subject to the planning department conditions and the engineering and construction services condition as set out in its memo dated April 8th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. Seconded from Mr. Taylor.
Happy to support that as well. Second it.
Thank you, Ms. Alderson. All in favor? Okay, unanimous approval. You have your approval, Mr. Key.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next application is item number 35, 52 Exmoor Drive. It's an application to sever the property into 2 undersized lots, and on each of such substandard lots as so divided to build a detached dwelling thereon. We have material submitted with the application, draft R plan, we have plans, applicant submissions, supporting documentation, the Long Branch checklist, engineering and construction services, forestry. We have 3 planning emails, one of which is a planning report dated April the 6th. I believe that's the most recent one. That was the other ones we're just talking about scheduling. So we have the planning report here. And I guess the speaker on this application is, first of all, William Otread, the agent, as well as the agent at 50 Exmoor, scheduled to speak. But I'd just like to draw committee's attention to the staff report. And the staff report deals with the 2 minor variance applications with the consent to recommending refusal of variances 3 for the floor space index for the 2 parts, and variance number 5, the rear yard setback for the 2 parts. And I have just a question for staff, because in all the years I've been doing this on a consent application, you only do the consent if you, at the same time, have an acceptable minor variance application. If you turn down the floor space index and perhaps the setbacks, you're not going to be able to build. And so we've created lots for which we do not have approved variances. So I throw that open to staff, is that how are we considering this application? My position would be, if the committee members felt that the variances 3 for the floor space index and variance 5 for the rear yard, if they agree with community planning, they should refuse the entire application, including the consents. Is that correct? Well, I would think we could, but what I'm suggesting is that we cannot do as planning is suggested, is to approve the consent. They should be mentioning here that we should be refusing the entire application, because from what I know, it is improper to create these substandard lots without also at the same time ascertaining what is going to be built. That is just my... Right, it's the recommendation of staff, but I'm just pointing out the problematic nature of granting 8 variances, and only 7 or 6, taking out the rear yard and taking out for sure the floor space index of 0.87, which would mean they could only build 0.35, which is not going to happen. Which I'm sure we can get the agent to agree to that. So let's speak to the agent, and again, we do have a neighbor present to see. My position would be just to advise that, notwithstanding the planning report, if the committee agrees with those variances should be refused, then in fact we have to refuse the entire application, including the consent, and that's all I'll say. Committee members can do what they want, but that's my view of matters. Okay, Mr. Ugrad, sorry for that long discussion, but I think it was important, and I'd like to certainly know your position on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to introduce myself, my name is Bill Otread. We're a planning consultant. We're the agents for 52 Exmoor. And yes, I'd agree in this instance, you can't necessarily approve a number of variances in the consent without the last 2 variances. The committee is aware of the variances. I'm not going to go through every variances we're applying for, except believe what we are applying for and what we have applied for is compatible with what the committee has seen previously over the last 3 or 4 years for this particular street. Maybe I'll just center in on the 2 specific variances that we're looking for, rear yard as well as FSI, that planning did not agree with our plans. Exmoor is, as you know, sort of a standalone neighborhood divided from the remaining part of Long Branch by Lakeshore Boulevard West. So it's an interesting small street abutting the CN rail track. I believe I did provide a quick overview presentation material regarding this particular site. I'm not sure if it's possible, or if the committee has seen it, or if possible to put the map on
the board
screen.
It's the supporting documentation. I don't know if there's a date.
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't have the specific date. If the staff can't find it.
In our bookmark, it's called supporting documentation. There you go.
Yes, that's it. Okay. The staff can just go to, as he said, the next page. And then the street plan, I believe it's the next page. Yes, there we are. That's essentially Exmoor. It's made up of 9-10 lots, essentially. There's only a couple of lots that have not been redeveloped immediately to the east side. But all the rest of the homes along Exmoor have all gone through the Committee of Adjustment process, except for the older original homes. If the next slide shows the elevations, I just want to show compatibility. What's proposed are the two homes on the left side. The rest of the homes are shown as existing on the right side. There's about 3, 4, 5 homes in this particular streetscape. You can see they're almost exactly the same size, scale, height. They look much the same. So this generally, I would say, is the character of this particular street. And then maybe if you go for 2 slides further to the consent minor variances, new builds at Exmoor. We've provided a breakdown of the other variances since, I guess the original one was 2013, giving the breakdown of specifically the FSI as well as the rear yard setbacks. You'll see the FSI is anywhere from 1.18 for the 42 Exmoor application, through to generally 0.81, 0.82, 0.83. Our FSIs that we're proposing, and this is reduced, we did work with planning to reduce them somewhat, but our FSIs are 0.85 and 0.87. Furthermore, our rear yard setbacks are 5.21 and 5.83. The others on the street the committee has approved, they're actually smaller rear yard setbacks, so 4.4, 4.22, 4.43, 5.13. So we're actually providing slightly larger rear yard setbacks. So what my question is, and I appreciate planning's comments about the issue of specifically compatibility, but from the review of the elevations I've shown, plus this chart that shows that specifically with rear yard, we are compatible with the other approvals on Exmoor. We are slightly above with the FSI, what I would say is the average that's been approved, but certainly a matter of, I believe square footage wise, 20, 30 square feet over. I would certainly suggest in this instance that our square footage that we're applying for as far as the FSI is concerned is certainly compatible and in line with what the committee has approved for this, the other houses that have been approved on the street. So I would suggest, just summarizing, that the variances that we're requesting are all in accordance with what has previously been approved. I would suggest that what has previously been approved is the context and is the neighborhood on this particular street. And we made the decision to go forward with the committee and not revise again, just because it was going to be such a small revision to ascertain planning comments. We feel that what we have in front of us now is certainly reasonable, meets the 4 tests, and I'll use this word one last time, is compatible with the other builds that have been constructed on the street and approved by the Committee of Adjustment over the last 3-4 years.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Good time, exactly 5 minutes. Any questions for Mr. Otread before we go hear from the neighbor? And it looks like the neighbor is sitting on, at 50 right next door, it's sitting on the same kind of lot that this is. This is like a lot that's capable of being divided, or from that streetscape you sent us, it's the bungalow on to the right. Is that correct? Mr. Otread?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Okay, so let's hear, I don't know if you've had any discussions with neighbors. Jackie Elfiki. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, she is unmuted. I tried sound checking her earlier. It wasn't successful. I thought maybe she just stepped away from the computer.
Do we know if she had, because there's no letters, do we know if she was of concern, or maybe she's just watching to See if this goes through, she can do the same thing. Are you there, Jackie? Elfiki? I thought I heard someone. Okay, because we don't know if she has concern. I don't know if Mr. Otread knows if him or his client has had any contact with the neighbor.
Quickly, Jackie did call our office and spoke to Arlene in our office back about a month or so ago. I think she's interested in doing the same thing.
Okay, that's what I would do. Okay, so if we can't find her, we can't find her, but, you know, she was pre-registered, so
She is present, but there's no audio.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in the meantime, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Otread about this application?
It's Sophia Reddick. I just had a question. So just if you could comment on the concerns raised by the city staff in terms of the nearness to the CNR rail and the concerns of Metrolink, the safety concern issues.
So you're asking me about the safety concern issues?
Yes, if you could comment.
I haven't seen anything from Metrolinx on this application. As I said, we researched the other applications, and I don't believe Metrolinx commented on the other applications that have been approved either. So I'm not quite sure where planning is coming up with the concern, because there has been nothing submitted as part of this application.
Okay. Yeah, planning obviously did write. There is a paragraph here about, since the subject property is located in close proximity to the rail corridor and abuts CNR rail from the rear, the required variances rear yard setback would raise safety issues in proposed dwellings. Additionally, Metrolinx, although we've seen that the other lots have even smaller rear yards. Additionally, Metrolinx has indicated there are concerns with the adjacency of the dwellings to the rail corridor due to the reduced rear yard setback. Also require the proposal to meet these required setback and enter an agreement with Metrolinx with regard to the adjacency to the rail corridor. These concerns have been communicated to the applicant, has chosen to proceed without further revisions. So then they go on to just talk about, they feel that the floor space and rear yard setbacks, but we don't have any contact directly from Metrolinx. Would you know, Mr. Otread, if the other redeveloped properties on Exmoor had to do similarly? Because they would even, as you said, they're even closer to the rear lot line, some of them.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
We did research the other applications, and I don't believe there is any issues or any conditions pertaining to the setbacks to the Metrolinx line.
Okay. And again, I'm surprised that the planner wrote such a report and it was signed off by managers that you'd approve a consent and just refuse the major variance and leave them with something they couldn't build. But technically, they would have 8 other variances and they'd have a severed lot. So that's just my comment. Community planning panel members. Any comments or questions for Mr. Otread, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion? And again, I would suggest, if you're inclined to agree with community planning that the GFA is too high, I would refuse the entire application.
Mr. Chair, this is obviously a street in transition, and I believe that what's proposed is more in keeping with the character of the streetscape, limited streetscape on this short street. Yeah, I'm having difficulty dealing with the planning staff report. Yes to consent, no to variances. You know, I think it's all or nothing here, and I'm moving for all. I would move approval of the consent subject to the standard conditions of consent, plus the conditions requested by engineering and construction services. And I would move for approval of the 2 minor variance applications subject to urban forestry conditions 2 and 3.
Okay, thank you for that motion, Mr. Taylor. And before we go to a seconder, I just pointed out also, I just realized this is within Long Branch, so it's quite noteworthy that Long Branch seems to comment on a goodly number of applications in Long Branch are not here to voice any objection, which is interesting. So I assume they have no issues with this. I assume it's within their, even though it's on the, as the agent said, it's on the other side, it's a sort of unique character. I believe I would think it's still within Long Branch jurisdiction. So.
Danny
do I have a
Belissimo
second?
seconds the motion.
Thank you,
I
Danny.
think as can I just make a comment? I think as Mr. Taylor said, it's no longer the prevailing character of that particular street.
Yes, okay.
So I was going to second that motion with that comment, but
Okay. Danny
Mr.
votes in
Belissimo has seconded it.
favor. Okay, so all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 4-1 with Ms. Ruddick dissenting. Thank you, Mr. Otread.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Item number 36 is 71 Thorncrest. And it's an application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. There are 7 variances. We have, this one also, yeah, this was also deferred, matter was deferred from the August 1st, 2019 hearing to address urban forestry and planning concerns. It's a detached dwelling. We have the applicant submissions, supporting materials, forestry comments, planning. Planning is requesting that variance 2 be modified from 0.1 coverage to 0.39, whereas 0.38 is permitted. There are transportation conditions. Heritage initially back in 2020 said they might have some interest, but apparently they are not going to be commenting as the demolition has ended any heritage interest in the property. And urban forestry conditions 1 and 2, 7 letters of support, 2 letters of opposition. Okay, Mr. Giordano is the agent. He's the only one registered to speak on this application.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Peter Giordano. I'm with David Small Designs, 1405 Cornwall Road in Oakville, and I'm the authorized agent for the application.
Okay, in terms of someone else registered, I don't think we need a full presentation, but perhaps we need to hear from you on the fact that staff is recommending that variance 2 for floor space index be modified from 0.41 to 0.39. They go through the fact that planning staff previously recommended deferral, that the plans were changed. There were certain improvements, which they list, a whole bunch of removal of variances as set out in the email. They go through that there was an analysis, and they still feel that even though it was brought down to 0.41 times the lot, that it should be further reduced to 0.39 times the area of the lot. So, Mr. Giordano, did your client agree with that? And if not, can you give us a presentation on why that recommendation should not be followed?
Yeah, exactly. Could I ask the moderator to display slide number 15 from my presentation? So in January of 2020, frustration was, it set in when we felt we had reached a compromise with the planner for an FSI of 0.42. The planner responsible for our file was changed, and so did the line in the sand. Planning insisted we reduce our FSI even further. So once again, we reduced it to 0.41. Planning insisted that we reduce it below 40%, and staff report calls out for an FSI of 0.39 as our new target. Our design for this home is centered around our client's young son. He's confined to a wheelchair, requires not only accessible openings and clearance, but he also requires ceiling mounted tracks, ramps, mobility vans, and side ramps from the vans. We made several reductions many times, and we made it clear to the planner that the last round of changes brought us to a spot where further reductions would be too punitive to the requirements of proper function, access, and egress for the family with a member with confined mobility and disability. So you'll see that on the slide that's shown on your screen, you'll see that we have a mobility van. They had asked us to try to reduce the garage size. We have a mobility van with a side-mounted ramp. We have a flush curb that comes from the garage into The mudroom, which requires a 5-foot turning radius for accessibility. Door openings larger than normal. We have a ramp from the front entrance into the house. The entrance is only 7 feet wide. We don't see that as outrageous. We've got the need for an elevator to get to the second floor. The son has a fully equipped mobility equipment bedroom on the second floor to be with the family where they're close to him so they can service his needs. But they've learned through the last little while with storms and power outages that the room on the ground floor is also necessary for the potential for him to occupy the ground floor when he can't get to the second floor. So we show on the ground floor, there is what we call a guest bedroom. That's effectively also got a bathroom with a 5-foot turning radius that accesses it for that exact purpose. We have special ventilation requirements, so we have a second furnace that's up on the second floor. These are all items that we find are very necessary to the proper functional use of the house. This brought us to a point where getting less than 41.41 as the FSI, we don't believe. I think the number works out to about. Let's just see what the number is. It's not a lot difference. It is.
I would like you to tell me what's the difference in square footage from 0.41 to 0.3 to point whatever they want, 39.
It's
Couple of square meters?
264 square meters or 24.53 square. Sorry, 24 square meters or 264 square feet. So that's the extra that they're asking us to reduce to try to get it down from that. And we've pushed and pulled. We've made concessions to 10 different items as the planning report. And the planning report does state. These are items that we don't believe we can push or pull any further.
Yeah, so the planning report, goes through and first of all, there was an earlier planning report in July, so the matter was deferred. As I mentioned at the outset, there was another planner on the file, and you said that that planner had accepted, and then they changed planners on you, and then the planner came down from 0.4. Originally, they told you to go to 0.41, and then they told you to go to 0.39.
Yeah, we've had three different planners on this one, but
and they all have different opinions.
Yeah, correct.
Mm-hmm. And they knew about, you explained these, obviously it's on your plans, the extra area for mobility features. They are aware of all of that.
We did. We spoke to the planner's manager, and they just they mentioned that they didn't find that they could move off of that line of 0.39. Now, we had discussions with the Thorncrest Residents Association, who initially had some concerns, who have now come on board and are now supportive of our application. As our neighbors, we had 3 letters of opposition. The 2 neighbors on either side who presented letters previously are now in support. There was one other neighbor that was the 3rd letter. There were discussions with him, but they didn't have any further discussions or conversations. There is no updated letter from him. Right. So, neighbors on either side, neighbors behind, and the neighbor directly in front are all supporting our application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jordan. I just point out that although you and I both know that you don't plan for people, you plan for the property. However, and I can remember one distinct one in Etobicoke a couple of months ago. It was a much larger house, a Richard Wengel design, and it was because they had a special needs child, and they actually got more than just extra wide hallways. So, committee members and planners, you think are humans, and the distance in this case between 0.39 and 41 does not seem to be very large to me. So, especially when you seem to have a moving target dealing with City Hall over the last 2 years. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Giordano? He's the only speaker, and if not, is someone ready to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I find this to be a very reasonable proposal, especially given the homeowner conditions that affect them. I move for approval, subject to the Transportation Department conditions and Urban Forestry conditions 1 and 2.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Seconder for that, Mr. Belissimo. Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Giordano.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next application item number 37, 351 Blackthorn Avenue. This is an application to convert the existing dwelling into an apartment building. The building will contain a total of 6 residential units. There are 8 variances. And we have before us on this application cover letters. Minutes. This matter was deferred from November 7, 2019 hearing. We have a parking study, 3 planning memos or reports, and transportation. We have planning conditions of approval. And the speaker is Stephen Key, who was also the speaker on the application a few applications ago. And I don't believe there are any other speakers. No. Mr. Key, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Sir Chair and committee members. So yeah, again, my name is Stephen Chi from Design Plan Services. I'm here representing the owner of 351 Blackthorn Avenue.
Okay.
And I'm happy to give a presentation if needed. Thank you.
Yes, so we have, we don't have any transportation conditions. They're okay. We have planning. You read the planning memo. Are you okay with the memo dated March 31st regarding conditions about a rental housing demolition permit? There's a whole bunch of them. Number 6 conditions.
Yes, we have had an extensive discussion and revision based on planning comments and concerns. And we have no problem, no concerns regarding the recommended conditions.
Right. It was dated March 31st, but we have a memo dated May 19th saying that those the memo still applies. So thank you for advising that. And as well, we have, I don't think there's any other conditions. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Key? And if not, is someone ready to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I have a question first. Could the agent tell us how modifying the soft landscaping variance number 6 from 6% to 11%, does that have any consequential impact on other variances? Can you make that happen without adversely affecting anything else you're requesting? And if so, how?
Yes, I can answer that question through you, Sir Chair. So that was the request by city planning to increase our soft landscaping area, and that's going to be done in the front yard. So it will have nothing to do with the building itself. And right now, I think most of the front yard is paved. And this is just to restore it back into soft landscaping area to improve the front yard that's currently exist. That answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Key, or is someone ready for a motion?
Well, Mr. Chair, I find the variances requested meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I move for approval subject to the Community Planning Department conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Second for that motion. Laura Alderson, thank you. All in favor? You have unanimous approval, Mr. Key. Thank you. Okay, item number 38 is 98 Superior Avenue. It's an application to construct a triplex. We have 4 variances: parking, rear landscaping, lot area, and lot frontage for a triplex. We have minutes. This matter was again deferred August 13, 2020. and then deferred again April 13th when we didn't have had our reported hearing. We have cover letters dated June 2020. They're kind of old. We have supporting materials. We have demo permits. We have communication from the counselor that the triplex is not appropriate and the request for variance for the frontage is not minor and should be refused. That's the April 6, 2021 letter. We have Heritage will not be providing comments as the heritage resource has been lost due to demolition. And we have opposition. A lot of opposition, 19 letters of opposition. And, okay, speaker for this is Michael Flynn. And as well, we have the neighbors present from 96 Superior, 66 Albert, and 9 Stanley. So 96 Superior is right next door. So Mr. Flynn, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think we should start out by saying that this site is zoned for a triplex with frontage and area restrictions and parking, obviously. Mm-hmm. However, getting past that, I think that the variances being requested are relatively minor, and you will note there is no planning comment. There is no FSI variance, no JFA variance, no lot coverage variance. There is no longer a valid forestry comment, and as you've stated, no HPS comment. Now, it should be noted, and it said so in my cover letter, that this property was never designated or listed as a heritage property. So why HPS is commenting that way is somewhat questionable in my mind, because it never was a heritage asset. The only reason the heritage issue came up was because this application was brought. It was never even contemplated to be a heritage property prior to that. So as you said, there are a large number of objectors who have, what can I say, they've tried every angle under the sun, including invading the property and trying to stop an excavator from being parked on the property. And that was on a Saturday, if I remember correctly, and the police were called to remove these two people from the property, and they decided, due to the emergency that's ongoing, not to bother physically removing the people because the demolition wasn't taking place until the following Monday. And they thought possibly the people would be gone by then, and that's true. That's exactly what happened. You had a forestry comment about a tree in the rear yard at the time that the application was made. Since that time, forestry has actually issued a permit to remove that tree, and the tree has been removed, and therefore that forestry comment is no longer valid, and there is no new forestry comment. So outside of the ongoing debate with the neighbors, there really isn't any great reason for this to be considered injurious in any way. There are a number of other properties in the neighborhood, including 109 Cavill and 89 Cavill, that have been approved and are either under construction or completed with parking deficiencies. 78 Cavill is a triplex with a frontage of 7.9 meters. 29 Wesley Street is 8.5 meters frontage, and 42 Simon Street is 7.6 meters. These are all properties within a 5-minute walking distance. So the general area lends itself to this kind of development. The zoning allows for this kind of development. And I don't see that these variances are particularly offensive. So, for example, I'll give you all three of them, four of them. The parking requirement is 3. The proposed is 2. Rear yard landscaping is 50% required. The proposed is 46%. Lot frontage is 15. Well, we've talked about that. And the existing lot frontage is 6.78. And the lot area required for a triplex is 465 square meters. And the existing is 362.52, which is not severely deficient for the purposes, given that there is no FSI variance and there's no GSA.
Okay, you did
variance,
also
and there's
mention, sorry, you mentioned a few examples where they have triplexes on, because to me, those are your two major variances, that just like it's a substandard lot where a consent, where you don't, the lot has a substandard frontage and a lot area, that's where you are now. But you pointed out some examples where triplexes were permitted with less and similar lot frontage and lot area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Would you like me to repeat them?
No, I just want to make sure the members heard that, because, you know, we had another situation where they came in for a triplex, but a triplex was not permitted in that zone, so that was a variance. You don't have that variance. That's very important what you stated. And those particular people tried to pull a fat. They came back because they were told the triplex isn't permitted. They came back with a dwelling with 2 secondary suites, was effectively the same thing. The neighbors went crazy. And now, last we heard, they're coming back just with 1 secondary suite. But this is a different situation. Here in this zone, a triplex is permitted, provided you have a certain lot frontage and lot area.
Correct.
Okay, that's your variance.
Yeah, so I think that the actual planning issues are contained in those 3 variances. And the other issues that are brought up in the numerous letters of objection are not planning issues. It's basically they don't want it, they don't like it. I don't know why, but the bottom line is there was some that didn't like the tree being removed, but it was issued a permit and it has been removed. They didn't like the existing house being demolished, but a permit was issued and it has been demolished.
Okay.
So you can argue, you know, the rights of people to do what they want with their property. But, you know, this came straight from the building department. They issued the demolition permit and a building permit for a single-family home. And now the argument is, well, what right do you have to change what you're asking for? Well, you have every right to change what you're asking for. The interesting thing about it being issued a demolition permit is you have a 2-year period to build. If you don't build within that period, you get a fine of $20,000. So you can't just go and get a demolition permit. You have to have a plan. It doesn't matter that it was a single family or a triplex, but you have to have a plan and you have to actually do it. You have to commence construction within that 2-year period. So that is already dealt with under the bylaw and the demolition control bylaw.
Okay, please try to
So
wrap up, Mr. Flynn, please wrap up.
Okay, so the bottom line in my view is that these minor variances, the 4 minor variances requested, are minor. And they have no negative impact on surrounding properties, and I think they're appropriate and they should be approved. And I ask for the committee's approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Flynn? If no questions for Mr. Flynn, is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
I have one question. Is it true that Heritage asked that this proposal be deferred until they could study it for heritage purposes?
It was deferred. And it sat vacant, doing nothing for many months. You'll notice this was deferred from, where's my thing?
August 2000.
August 13th, 2020.
2020, yeah.
Yeah.
And
here we are.
during that time, did Heritage undertake a study of that particular Humberstone house?
It turns out that, as far as I know, they never did.
Yeah, they'd asked for an opportunity to evaluate the property before committee makes a decision on the variance application. blah, blah, blah. That was back, and I think the request was for 6 months, or no?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
I think this is one of the reasons it's so odorous to the community. That's just, from reading the files, that's what I got from it.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, so,
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt. We do have speakers on the file. However, the speaker from 96 Superior Avenue, he indicated to us earlier he was
I
going to
can't
try to
hear
make it.
anything.
sorry, no, the technician, the moderator is just telling us about the other people who were scheduled to speak after you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Okay.
Ryan Johnson, 96, is he with us?
He didn't have a chance to join, but the other two speakers are.
Okay, so let's hear from, if there's no questions for Mr. Flynn, let's hear from, the next speaker, Ken Frost at 66 Albert Avenue.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We've lived in the neighborhood in Mimico since 1988, so there have been a lot of changes. There are a few triplexes now. There are some small apartment buildings. There are a lot of lots being split and two houses put in. So there's a lot of change going on. But this particular proposal is odorous to the community for a few reasons. And one is all of the process that was followed in getting the demolition permit, in that the application was at the time for a single family home to be demolished, but it was really the same plan as the triplex, with two kitchens crossed out and turned into bars, and a den into a bedroom. So it was basically proposing to have a one family home with two bars and a kitchen, so that they can just convert it back into a triplex plan with three kitchens again as soon as the property was demolished. My understanding is that it was going to be considered for heritage listing on the Monday of the demolition, so that the demolition was pushed quickly. The building that was there was a beautiful stone-clad building that was one of three in a row, and on a corner lot that had a nice character for the community, a nice feel to it, and the proposed development is quite different. I don't think the lot frontage variance request is minor. Two parking spots versus two versus three is significant, where a lot of people do drive. One of the triplexes on Cavell does have a 3-car garage, and that's a new property put in, but it's actually a very nice looking building, and it's got enough parking for 3 units, and it's got green space. So I'm opposed, partly because of the process and partly because of the variances being major, not minor.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Frost? Okay, next speaker is Charlotte Sheesby Coleman at 9 Stanley Avenue.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm actually one of the persons, or the person who sat in front of the bulldozer. And I went over there just to see what was happening, sat on the porch. The owner, who was standing at the corner, called the police. They came and said I was trespassing. Would I mind moving to the sidewalk, which I did. Then they proceeded to pull up a huge bulldozer. So there was no tree protection.
Yeah, we really need
put in
to
place.
hear your comments
This
on the
is
application.
important. This is important. I have my 5 minutes.
Okay. No.
So they drove the bulldozer onto the property with no tree protection. They didn't remove the air conditioner that they were supposed to. Okay, they pushed this demolition forward in the dark of night. They stood there laughing while all the neighbors were upset. But the thing that I want to point out is the demolition permit, okay, there's so many irregularities to this file. And second of all, Mr. Flynn is incorrect. There was a huge heritage report done, over 20 pages long. The owners were well aware of it. And it was to go to the preservation board at 9 o'clock in the morning. I spoke to Sandra Seamus. I spoke to Elizabeth Sissom. I watched that preservation board meeting. They were disgusted and offended. And that's why Councillor Mark Grimes and John Tory put forward a motion, which was item 2020 MM 27.12, to change the planning application screening and heritage review process. That motion was passed unanimously by council, who all saw how wrong this was. The other thing that's really, Rose has pointed out some of the problems with the demolition process, but the demolition permit, which is attached to my letter, so if you could pull it up, is dated, it was issued on Wednesday, November 25th, 2020. Then if you look at the plans that I paid $71 to obtain, that are also attached to my letter, they were reviewed on November 30th, 2020, 5 days after the demolition permit was issued, and on the day that it was demolished. This isn't just odorous, this stinks to high heaven. And I am pushing for council to change make a change, make another motion so this can never happen again. To give these people the permission to now build a triplex after the only reason they got a demolition permit was because they said they were building a single family dwelling, would be the committee and the city giving them a license to lie. If you look at every page of the plans, it says reviewed as a single family home. Every single page of those plans. The plans were, those aren't the plans. That was a letter that I sent. The plans are part of my application. No, it's part of my application because I obtained the single family home plans. That's important.
Yeah, ma'am.
I don't want to look at the ones for the triplex.
Yeah, he's going through a whole bunch of letters. A lot of them are very, very similar.
Yeah.
Like a form letter, there's 19,
So,
so he has to go through and find yours.
mine is number 11.
Okay, well, he's got to find it because they just got numbers on them. There's 19 of them. And you know, I appreciate, the background of this is very important, and I appreciate that all the neighbors feel very aggrieved. But we are not a punitive body, just to let you know. So we have to look at, the application before us. And I agree that the lot size, and lot frontage are smaller. Triplexes are permitted as of right in this zone, unlike some other zones that we've dealt with. But there is a specific required lot area and lot frontage.
They obtained a demolition permit based on a single family home.
Right.
This is a joke.
But I'm saying in order to get a triplex, because that's what's before us, they're supposed to have a specific lot frontage and obviously parking and lot frontage and lot area, and they don't. They're significantly less. So that's how the committee has to look at it.
Well, they need to look at the plans that got them the demolition permit. Yeah. These people should be fined.
Like I said, we're not maybe someone, but we're not a punitive body. And we're not allowed
That's not the point. You have a responsibility.
No, I'm saying we're not allowed to.
You have a responsibility.
We have to look at the application on its merits.
Look at the plans.
Not look at bad activity or anything that they did prior. We have the application before us. But I'm saying I guess your argument is they only got the demolition permit because they said they were going to do a single family, right?
That's correct.
I understand your argument. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else? So thank you, Ms. Sheesby Coleman. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Okay, so I don't think we have any. So Ryan Johnson is not joining us, the guy right next door, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we have to go back to Mr. Flynn to rebut the comments from the neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd like to point out that the onerousness of this is tactics, or at least that's what the claim is, that our tactics were not nice, unfair, however you want to call them, but they were definitely legal. And the tactic used by these neighbors was to run to Heritage Services and try and have a building that was not even of any interest to Heritage Services listed or, declared a heritage building. That's a tactic. And that's why everything else happened from there. The fact that people think they can trespass to stop activity on the property, which was legal except for the tree protection zone, I will grant you that, and Forestry dealt with them on that matter and then turned around and issued permits for tree removal. So Forestry at the current time has no issue. So, they keep playing the forestry card, but it's not an issue. So, as owner says, they may find this. It's still about planning issues. It's not about whether we're nice or not nice. And they certainly weren't nice in any of this either. So, this is a two-way street. But the bottom line is the variances are minor. And they have little or no impact. I mean, a single-family dwelling can become a duplex immediately. So they can have a secondary suite. They're entitled under the law to have a secondary suite. So we're asking for 3 suites. And it is zoned for 3 suites. So I think it's the appropriate development of the site, and I ask for your approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Any follow-up questions for Mr. Flynn or the neighbors, or someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll put something on the floor. I'm going to make a motion that's strictly based on the merits of the case, notwithstanding the fact that the process has been described as odorous and may well have been. The issue before us is whether or not the requested variances, the four requested variances, are minor or not. And I'm very much swayed by the fact that the property here is zoned for triplexes. We don't have a community planning department comment, pro or con. There are no lot coverage, FSI, side yard, rear yard, or front yard variances requested. So on balance, my motion is to approve without conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. The seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. And I've lost visual on Laura Alderson. So, Laura, if you have your hand up, I can't see it. There you are. Okay, so we're waiting for a motion. No seconder for the motion? Okay, do I have another motion? That motion fails. Well, if you're not, someone's not seconding that motion, I guess the option is to refuse the application. Sophia?
I'm prepared to make a motion to refuse the application. I don't find that the variances requested are consistent with the core principles of the test.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Radek. Motion to refuse. I have a seconder for that.
Danny Belissimo seconds the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 3-2. Mr. Taylor and Mr. Clark dissenting. The application is refused. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Thank you, neighbors.
Mr. Chairman.
Our next application is item number 39, 611 Keel Street. It's an application to construct a new self-storage facility. There are 5 variances. We have before us survey and the plans minutes. This matter was deferred from the January 21st, 2021 hearing. We have correspondence, clarification, and waivers, supporting materials, applicant's presentation. We have planning memo dated March 31st. It says it's dated April 12th, but I assume they said it still applies. It says community planning has no further objections to the proposed minor variance application because there would have been a previous memo from staff for deferral in January 2021. And as well, we have transportation advising that their comments from January 14th, 2021 still apply. And in that, hold on, find that one, they wanted, they had said they had no objection in their memo dated January the 14th. So that's what we have before us on this application. We have the counselor, we have letters of opposition. We have the counselor in support, I believe. Let's see. Oh, hold on. No. No, she's not in favor of it. They talk about it.
She's not in favor.
Yeah, I said because it said self-storage is not the best use. Okay, and the counselor is not in favor, as well as there are numerous 20 opposition letters to this application. The applicant is Calvin Lance. We have Councillor Nunziata on the line, as well as various neighbors, 3 other neighbors registered to speak as well.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, most of the neighbors are here. The only person that's missing, and they will not be joining us, is 1952 St. Clair Avenue West.
Okay. So we have the councillor and 2 other speakers. Just point out, yeah, I think this was the application. I recall that when it was up last time, I believe planning had asked for a deferral to study the area with respect to parking or transportation. I don't see the previous minutes here, but that was my recollection. Oh, it is. Here it is. Minutes. Yeah. There was a deferral from to April 13th, the one that was aborted, and that was back in January. It was a 3-month extension for them to wait the results of the Kiel St. Clair Avenue West local study area. I don't know if that actually happened or not, but that's why it was deferred. So we'd like to perhaps hear what the result of that was. So the agent for the applicant is Calvin Lance, solicitor. So we'll hear from Mr. Lance first. Mr.
Great,
Lance,
thank you. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to start by saying a little bit about the site. This is a site that is presently designated employment. It has a general employment designation. It's highly contaminated. And through the designation permits a number of manufacturing processes, warehousing, and storage uses, among other uses. It's zoned IC, industrial. It permits self-storage. The use of a self-storage facility on this site is permitted as of right. So the variances that we're seeking relate to an increase in height of an additional 3.5 meters. And then there's some additional height exceptions that are being sought as part of the variance to bring it in line with the new zoning bylaw. So right now we're under 43886, and this variance would line it up with the new zoning bylaw. And then there's a parking space variance and a loading space variance and a grade variance. And that's just to create certainty when it comes to defining the height of the building. Now, this development site has had a bit of a history. We first approached city staff back in 2018, and we proposed to them that we were going to do a 7-story self-storage facility, to which city staff did not look at that fondly. And we had a lot of discussions with them through 2018 and into 2019. When we understood that city staff, the planning staff, were
agreeable with our proposal of a 5-story self-storage facility, our client purchased the land. We made an application for site plan approval in August of 2019, and we applied for the minor variance in July of 2020. And both of those dates, the date when we applied for site plan approval and the date when we applied for the minor variance, predated the commencement of the study that you referred to, which was the St. Clair or the Kiel St. Clair West local area study, which is still underway. We've had ongoing discussions with staff. We've provided images of what we're proposing. This is a facility that includes a retail component at the northwest corner of the site in proximity to a transit station stop. This site is opposite of a McDonald's. It's kitty corner to a large retail complex that RioCan built. This is an improvement over the site, but most importantly, it's for a permitted use that's as right in the zoning and in the official plan. Now, there are a number of letters in opposition. There's a small handful in close proximity to the site, and the balance, the bulk of letters come from much further away from the site. But there's a consistent theme when you go through the letters. The people objecting to the use, the people in opposition are in fact objecting to the use, and they're not objecting to the variances that are before this committee. Yeah. And this committee, unfortunately, or fortunately, needs to look at the 4 tests. It needs to look at the official plan as adopted by council, the zoning bylaw as passed by council. It needs to consider staff reports and comments of staff. Staff in this case are not objecting, and they're not even suggesting conditions be imposed. And this, I believe, underscores the fact that we've gone through a rather extensive consultation process with staff. There's been iterations of the design. We're coming to the end of the site plan approval process, and city staff are fine. Unfortunately, there are those in the neighborhood who do not like the as of right use. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, is not for the committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but that's my presentation.
Okay, you actually had another 30 seconds. Mr. Lance, my comments, again, very persuaded by your comment about you're permitted as of right. So the issue is the neighbors aren't complaining about the 4 variances. They're complaining about the use, which is permitted as of right. And back in January, when this matter was referred, it shows just Mr. Taylor dissented to that referral. I remember I was quite against it as well, and I thought it actually an abusive process to bring that application after your client has bought the property, is proposing a use that's permitted under the bylaw, had done plans. At that 11th hour, I was I believe you were upset with that, but now we're 3 months later, and they just wanted. It's interesting because the councilors normally follow the planning department. Planning is okay here. The councilor is obviously a political matter. We have 20 support letters. I don't blame the councillor for, supporting her constituents, but it's not a question of the vision and what they'd like to see there. It's a permitted use as of right, subject to 4 variances. So that's my comments. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions or comments, and let's move on to the other speakers. I guess the first one is Councillor Nunziata. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I just want to make a comment on the applicant that he was not aware of the planning study. There was a motion that went through council in 2020, in spring of 2020, to conduct the planning study. So the applicant was quite aware of the planning study. And also our planning department, even though they know that this is as of right, they would prefer another application. I'm here today to speak against the applicant's request to construct a new self-storage facility at 611 and 613 Kiel Street. The site is located at Kiel and St. Clair, just a short walk away from the planned St. Clair GO Smart Track station. With the planned local transportation, transit, and infrastructure improvements in this area, city planning is currently undertaking a local area study to develop a planning framework for the creation of a complete community. The site is located in the study area, and with its location at the main intersection of Keele and St. Clair, right at the main intersection, it's a key development site in the community. A self-storage facility is not the highest and best use for the land. If a self-storage facility is permitted to be built at this site, it will be a missed opportunity for a good development in an area of the city which is seeing growth, significant investment, both from the public and private sector. The local community has been very vocal in their objection to this application, noting that this is an area in the midst of revitalization and a self-storage facility does not align with the vision for this area. I echo the views of the community and ask that you refuse the requested variances and encourage the applicant to come forward with an application that supports growth along the segment of Keele Street. This is an area that we're looking to revitalize. There's a number of development applications. We have to go in the smart track. Having a storage facility right at the intersection of Keele and St. Clair, where transportation is going to widen St. Clair Avenue and also on Guns Road, is not in keeping with what the community and what we want for this community. We've been working very hard on building communities at that intersection. And with the planning study, we're hoping that we can get retail, we can get development in the area and get community benefits and make a community that we deserve in that area. So I'm asking you to oppose this application, even though he has the right and it's as of right, but I know that the planning staff would much rather have a development where it's in keeping with our planning study and what the community is looking for.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, first of all, I just want to clarify, I didn't mean to say that I realized the Keele planning study predated the application, but what I recall is that on January 21st or whatever the day was, that morning, a memo arrived to the surprise of the committee and the applicant. And that was a question of, springing on him at the last minute. I agree, it's not the highest and best use, it's a missed opportunity, it's not within the vision for the area that the community has. But this is a private piece of land owned by a private landowner. Doesn't he have the right to develop it the way he wishes if it's within the zoning bylaw, subject to a few variances? I don't know if maybe someone else wants to buy this. I don't know if the city wants to buy the property from him, but he said we have a private landowner wishing to put a specific use on his property.
But what about the rights of the community? And there has been other.
They don't.
We're trying to revitalize the area, and that's why Councillor Bylaw and I put that motion through for a planning study. In light of the GO station and Smart Track, we want good development in that area, and a self-storage facility right at the intersection of St. Clair and Keele is not in keeping with what our planning study. Wow. And that planning study will be adopted in the next month.
Okay. But we have a private landowner wishing to do a certain use. Some of these self-storages are beautiful. You should look at the one on Castlefield Avenue, just west of Dufferin. They're beautiful.
I have enough self-storage.
Yeah, I know.
I have enough self-storage facilities in my ward.
Yes, I know. But my only concern here is that we have a private landowner wishing to do something that the bylaw permits. And I realize the community would like something different and the area is in flux. But, how does the committee not allow? We have to look at those 4 variances that Mr. Land said and not the use itself, which is a permitted use. That's my view.
Can I
Any questions? Any questions?
Can I have a question? Yeah, Danny Belissimo has a quick question. Laura, just have of the councillor. Councillor, this area still has a BIA active?
No, it unfortunately that area does not have a BIA.
Okay.
Because of a lot of the retail in that area are malls and big box. Okay. No, we don't have a BIA, but in Councillor Bylaw's ward, which is just east of that site, I believe has a BIA.
Okay, thank you. I thought there used to be a BIA here before many years ago, but thanks. At present, there isn't. Thank you.
As you know, this area was part of the slaughterhouses, Canada
Yes.
Packers, and that, yes. So that's
Laura, you
why-
go ahead now.
No, I just wanted to comment that even though community planning has no conditions on this particular file, they have suggested that the applicant go back and revise their application to come back with the highest and best use. So they did specify that. They did not specify conditions because it is as of right, but they did specify that they would prefer or they would like the applicant to come back with the highest and best use. So.
Yeah, and you're correct.
Yeah, again, I hear they talk here about an interim use. You have seen that there's some Shoppers Drug Marks which are just there. They put them up, and I figure in 10 years they'll take them down and build something else. So they do make that comment. I agree with Ms. Alderson. They do say that, but my issue is individual property rights. That this applicant has the right, subject to the consideration of the variances, obviously, but that this use is a permitted use, and it's their land.
Wow.
Unless the city wants to buy the land from them. I'm just saying, it's a private landowner who was back in January given a 3-month delay, and we're now back looking at it. So that's just.
Well, there has been developers in the area that have approached the applicant to buy the site, but unfortunately the applicant said no to that because there are a number of development applications at the city that will be approved in the next few months.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions for the councillor, or we can go on to the next speaker? Mr. Sang, Weiho Sang at 603 Kill Street. So just very close by.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Weiho Sang, and I have a letter I want to read to the committee that I prepared. I own and occupy the building 603 Keel, south and of immediately adjacent to the development site at 611 and 613 Keel. I am not supportive of the proposed development for 611, 613 Keel Street. Both the use and the design of the building are completely out of step with the city's and neighborhood's vision of what could be and should be constructed at the intersection of St. Clair and Keel Street. It's taken some 40 years for the Stockyards to be transformed into a vibrant retail and residential neighborhood, and I believe that with the proximity of the planned GO Smart track station, the transformation will only be accelerated. I realize that the current zoning permits storage uses, but I would ask that you not make matters any worse by granting a 3.5 meter increase in the height of the building, which would only add another floor to this development. I would ask that you do not make matters worse by granting any decrease in the required number of parking stalls. I know that the developer's traffic engineers have submitted a report substantiating a reduction in the number of spaces from 21 to 8, and that the report has been accepted by transportation services. But I counted more than 600 storage units in the building, and I simply cannot believe that only 8 of the 600 occupants will show up at any given time. I think that the parking will then often be full, and that trucks and cars will be backed up on Keel Street, engines running, so forth. It is unfortunate that the city did not address the matter of zoning earlier, and it is unfortunate that the developer wants a storage building, but I would ask that you not make matters any worse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, if none, let's go to the next speaker. Zanet Zukowski at 174 Mullock Avenue.
Yeah, hi. This is actually her husband. I was having some issues earlier with my speaker.
Okay.
So I couldn't communicate. She had to go to work. So this took a little longer than we expected. Really quickly, yeah. Yeah, obviously, we don't really want a storage facility behind our house. We are directly behind this unit. However, I do understand that they have the right to do it. We were not really, if it's going to be a storage unit, I'm not really in opposition to a height difference, 3.5 meters, because either way I'm blocked But I do agree with the previous caller's concerns about the parking and backing up on Keel. It's already a zoo basically on that street, and any further damage is not welcome. And that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay, any questions for that speaker, or we'll go back to Mr. Lance for his rebuttal?
Great, thank you. And thank you for those comments. I think I just want to start off by saying it's really important, and I think it's been highlighted already in this discussion, that there should be certainty for landowners when they make an investment in a property, and especially after they've consulted with city staff about their desired use of the property, that they have certainty. But that certainty, of course, always needs to be weighed against the interest of the public. And the ability of the public to get involved in a process happens through this type of meeting, but it also happens through an official plan amendment exercise and a rezoning exercise. I mean, there is a process for changing the use of a property, and the city has not gone through that process. And so the landowner then relies upon the zoning as it's read, and relies upon the conversation the owners had with staff about what uses are in fact permitted. And it's a balance then between the certainty and what's fair for the community and fair for us. But there is a process here to change the zoning, and that hasn't been done. And there's a process to change the official plan. And the second point I want to highlight is that not every site needs to be the best use. Self-storage facilitates and it accommodates high density development. It's used by commercial facilities in the area. Every site cannot be a residential site. Every site cannot be an office tower. It's a combination of uses that creates a complete community. And so this self-storage facility here will actually work well and be compatible with and be a benefit to the new community that's emerging in this area for planning studies that haven't even been started yet. With respect to the landowner to the south, that's the key point. He's to the south. There's no shadow impacts from a building that has an additional 3.5 meters in height. And city staff, they're charged with the responsibility of looking at studies and making reports based on their professional experience to the committee. And this, the staff members we have here, both on transportation and planning, have had months and months and months to look at this and study it. And they have had an opportunity to ask us questions and produce drawings. And in the end, they have no objections. For the variances were being sought. Use is not the issue here. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. Any further questions for Mr. Lance or any of the other speakers? Or is someone ready to weigh in with the motion?
Mr. Chair, I think this issue of certainty is crucially important. This land is designated for the proposed use. It is zoned for the proposed use, notwithstanding that it could well be built for a higher and better use in, who knows, a month or 2 or 6. This landowner has certain rights as set out in the official plan and the zoning bylaw. And at issue for us is whether or not the requested variances are minor or not. And I believe they are, and I believe they meet the other tests under the Planning Act. I move approval without conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you for that motion. I have a seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. Okay, actually, why don't you, so no one's prepared to second that motion, then the motion will fail. And if it fails, I need another motion.
I'm prepared to make that motion. I believe one of the 4 tests is whether this is a desirable development for the lot, for the space in question. And being that it is at a major intersection, and also because there is a zoning review or planning study, whatever you want to call it, in motion, I can't support this application, so I will be refusing it.
So you believe the variances are the application is not worthy of support, so motion to refuse. Do I have a seconder for that? Ms. Ruddick, okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 3-2. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Clark opposed. Thank you, neighbors. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Lance.
Thank you.
Our last application of the afternoon is item 43 Langside Avenue. It's an application to construct a 2nd-story addition over the existing dwelling, a 2-story rear addition, a new covered front porch, and a new detached garage in the rear yard. There are 5 variances. We have minutes of the March 9th meeting from which this matter was initially deferred, March 9th, 2021. We have a petition in support. We have a letter of opposition. And that's all we have. Speaker on this application. Speakers are Chris Marchese, the agent, and Paul Rodriguez from 44 Deerhurst Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow committee members. Chris Marchese, planner at Design Plan Services, here to present this application here in front of you today. Don't know if we need a presentation or not, but just a couple quick points that I would like to know for the committee. The lot coverage of the actual dwelling is at 28.11%. Due to the detached garage being included in the lot coverage of 7.02%, we're proposing 35.35. But the resulting coverage does not result in an overbuild and is lined up with the front and rear main walls of the dwellings on either side. The front yard setback is being taken from the bay window on the 2nd story, but in all fairness, the proposed front main wall is existing in the exact location which it is today at 5.96 meters away from the front property line. In terms of the dwelling length, this was reduced as per planning staff's request from 18.45 meters to 18 meters. And I would also like to note that the proposed length of the dwelling is 14.76 with an addition, and as well as the window, it's being included at 18.0 meters. In regards to the flat roof height, we're proposing 7.8 where 7.2 is permitted. If I can just have the city staff pull up the front elevation, which was submitted to committee. Perfect. As you can see here, the existing first floor, if you can just zoom in, is located already 1.1 meters above the grade, which is an existing condition, which is drawing up the height a little bit. And as you can see, from the underside of the ceiling on the first floor to the top of the 2nd floor, there's a little bit of a gap there. That is just to add more support joist. The existing ceiling or the floor, the 2nd floor, wasn't developed or built to sustain a 2nd story addition on it, so they needed to just add some more joist there. Ceiling heights are proposed at 9 feet and 10 feet respectively, and I am of the opinion that the application meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time. One other note before I hand it over, sorry, Mr. Chair, is I acknowledged and read the opposition letter from the neighbor. Majority of it has to do with construction and water issues, which is not in the jurisdiction of this committee. Yep. And in regards to the lot coverage, I am of the opinion that is not an overbuild due to the front and rear main wall being located in accordance with the abutting neighbors, and the fact that the dwelling is actually at 28.11%, and the garage is included in that calculation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the letter here from P. Rodriguez at 44 Deerhurst, and we also have him present on the line anyway for a deputation. Mr. Rodriguez?
Do we have questions? Sorry, are we missing the question period of the applicant?
Okay, you have a question for him at this time? Go ahead. Before we hear
yes, I thought that was the order. Clarification, this floor assembly extra height, does that mean that the existing building is not being entirely demolished?
No, this is an addition through you, Mr. Chair. This is an addition. That's
Okay.
a second-story addition, so it's
Right,
going on
okay.
top of the first floor that's existing right now today.
So you're leaving in essence the attic, the ceiling joists of the first floor.
Exactly, and then just adding
Okay.
on to stabilize and then make sure that the structure is sound. So they're adding another joist between the first and second floor just to stabilize the weight bearing of the second story that's proposed to be constructed.
I see. So I understand. It's a new floor assembly designed to take the load. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in general statement, in terms of the application to the Committee of Adjustment, why is it that where it says, why is it not possible to comply with the condition, the actual bylaws, it says compliance with the bylaw would result in the creation of undesirable housing, and that's just like a catch-all for everything. Why is that allowed?
Why are variances allowed?
No, why is the comment made, compliance with the bylaw would result in the creation of undesirable housing? Why is that allowed as a reason not to comply with the bylaws?
You understand, Mr. Carvalino, I don't understand what you mean. Where does it say that undesirable, where does it say that?
It's on the application by the consultant to the Committee of Adjustment. It says, why is it not possible to comply? And it was written in, compliance with the bylaw would result in the creation of undesirable housing. Now, how can that person make
You're saying we don't have copy that. You're saying the actual application to the committee,
yes.
They say, why is it not possible to comply with the bylaw? You know?
Yeah, and
there's, I guess, it's, that's the committee, people have the right to, someone could apply to put a 70-story up building on their property, the city would have to take it in. So it's of your right to make an application. That's just the right to do it. Now, in terms of the city, obviously, I think you said why it should be a reverse onus. You should have to show, I think I saw in your letter, that you should have to show why you can't comply. But
why are they allowed, sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chair. Why are they allowed to make, it would create undesirable housing if they can't comply with zoning bylaws?
I don't know. I can ask Mr. Marchese to comment, but it's sort of, I guess, maybe a standard question or a standard answer on. Well, we don't even get the applications, but I guess it's a standard question on the application. Why can't you comply? So he put undesirable housing. In other words, I guess what he means is it's too. If you complied, you couldn't build a house that was worth building. That it was too small for their needs. But anyway, can you go on with your actual concerns?
Yes, my actual concerns, is my other one was the lot coverage. I believe Mr. Marchese touched on it, but it's still the 35% of lot coverage is actually translates into 17.8% in the actual allowed amount. So that's not minor. That's my number one issue. The number two is the downspout on the garage that's being built is at the back of the garage. So from the flat roof garage, all this water is going to then come onto my property.
Sir, we don't deal with drainage issues, so you can deal with that with him in the other forum, but we don't deal with construction or drainage.
Okay, so which forum is that?
It's a building issue. It's not something we deal with planning issues. We're dealing with the built form. We're not dealing with the location of the downspouts. You can deal with him. That's not what we deal with here.
Okay, so sorry, can you direct me? Who do I deal with then? Do I deal directly with the consultant or the engineer or what?
Deal with the with the neighbor and let him know what your concerns are as consultant. Then you can get in touch with the city and the building department. It's a building issue, not a Committee of Adjustment planning issue. We deal with planning matters and variances to the zoning bylaw. So you feel that I guess you look at a percentage and you say how can that's not minor because it's 17.8%.
Right.
That's your first point. Then you deal with the downspout, the garage and pump room.
Yes.
We can ask the applicant to respond to these questions.
Okay. And I guess question number 4 or 3 is I guess the garage is being built on slab, so there shouldn't be an issue with excavation, right? But I have hedges at the back, mature hedges that don't want to be damaged.
Well, I don't know. You can deal with your neighbor on that because we don't have a report from Urban Forestry regarding either private or public trees on this application that I can see.
Yeah, that's the first one is a tree report for a tree that might be in damage, but by the building of the garage.
Okay, so those are your concerns?
Yes.
Okay. Committee members, do you have any questions for the neighbor? No? Okay. So let's have the agent respond to your concern, sir.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the three comments that he had. Number one, in regards to lot coverage, I just want to make it clear that the dwelling is at 28.11%, which is compliant. There's no existing garage on the property or parking. The new built form and public realm official plan policy has tried to direct vehicular parking and driveways away from the front yard, which is kind of in keeping with this proposal. And it clears up a parking spot and provides a needed and legal parking space on the property. There's no variances associated to the garage. And I'm of the opinion that the proposed coverage is in keeping with the neighborhood and will not cause any adverse impacts. The downspout, as mentioned by Mr. Chair, there's no construction jurisdiction here, but there's been no comments from engineering or construction services regarding any runoff or drainage issues with this proposal. And in regards to the garage, as mentioned again by Mr. Chair, there's been no forestry comments, and obviously you're not permitted to damage any public or private tree on your property or any adjacent properties through your proposal and the construction of your proposal if approved. So I'm confident to say that all trees and all environmental and forestry issues will be protected if needed, but at this time forestry has provided no comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchese. Any further questions for Mr. Marchese, or is someone ready for a motion?
I have one question. Unless I'm missing something, there's only one signature of support on a support petition. Usually we get a few more than one on a petition. I'm just wondering if your client has spoken to all the surrounding neighbors or not.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I was not responsible with going around and collecting letters of support for this application, and I can't speak on what my client has done. What I can say is that he's obviously reached out to 41, which is the mutual driveway that I share with, and there was adequate public notice that was provided through this application, and no one else is in opposition of this application. So I can't confirm that we've gone door to door, but I can say that there's been minimal opposition with adequate public notice provided in regards and due to the Planning Act requirements.
And at least it's going to be one. At least it's the most directly affected one. But you're right. It says a petition. You expect to see more, but it is
usually.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, or is someone ready for a motion?
Danny Belissimo is ready to make a motion.
Yep.
If there are no further questions. I find that the variances are minor in nature. They're additions to existing structure, and we move approval of the 5 variances. I believe there are no conditions.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Belissimo. Seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion. Thank you, Ms. Alderson. All in favor? You have unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Marchese. I think you've been our last speaker on more than one occasion. Our last application.
Yes, I have. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just happy that we were able to finish in time for the Leafs game. So go Leafs, go.
Okay, exactly. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you, members, for another exciting day at committee. Okay, see you next. Some of you next.
Good night, everybody. Yeah, good night.